The night had been filled with voices, footsteps, and the kind of laughter that echoed through every room of Laura's home. Her small suburban house had always been the place where family gathered. It wasn't the biggest house, but it was warm, welcoming, and always smelled of home-cooked food. Tonight, it had been packed with people, her sisters, cousins, neighbors, even her brother who lived an hour away. They came for the family dinner she hosted once every couple of months. For hours, the house buzzed with conversations overlapping. Children running around, okay, and the smell of roasted chicken and apple pie drifting from the kitchen. Laura smiled and laughed, okay, and made sure every glass was filled. Every plate was covered, but deep inside she felt a familiar heaviness that came whenever the last guest left. She loved her family, but gatherings also reminded her of what she no longer had. After her divorce years ago, she had tried to keep traditions alive to show everyone she was fine. And for the most part, she was. But late at night, after everyone left, the silence always reminded her how alone she truly was. As the evening wound down, coats were gathered, goodbyes were said, and the front door opened and closed over and over until only the quiet hum of the refrigerator remained. Laura stood at the doorway, smiling as her last guest waved from the driveway. Before she gently closed the door, the house was still warm with the smell of food, but suddenly it felt too quiet. She leaned against the wall, letting out a deep sigh. The clinking of glasses, the sound of her niece's laughter, the soft chatter of her sisters, all of it had vanished, leaving only silence. She began to clear the table, carefully stacking plates and glasses onto a tray. She had gotten used to these routines, filling the emptiness with small tasks that distracted her from the hollow. Ache in her chest, she carried the tray toward the kitchen. But as she passed the living room, she stopped. A soft light glowed from the lamp in the corner. She frowned, realizing she must have forgotten to turn it off. But when she stepped closer, she froze. Someone was still sitting on the couch. Her son Daniel was there. Laura blinked, surprised. "Daniel, I thought you left with the others." Daniel looked up from where he sat, his expression calm, almost expectant. "No, Mom, I stayed." For a moment, Laura just stood there, holding the tray, not sure what to say. Daniel was 26 now, grown with a life of his own. He had his job, his friends, his independence. Usually, after family dinners, he would hug her and head out with the rest. But tonight, he had chosen to stay behind. She carried the tray into the kitchen, her heart beating faster than usual. When she returned, Daniel was still sitting there, leaning slightly forward, as if he had been waiting for her. Laura gave him a small smile. "You didn't have to stay behind to help with the dishes, you know. I can handle it." Daniel shook his head. "It's not that. I wanted to stay. I need to talk to you." Something about the seriousness in his voice made her pause. He wasn't looking at her with casual kindness. His eyes carried weight, as though he had been waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the house to empty and for them to finally be alone. Laura's chest tightened. She tried to brush it off, but her hands felt unsteady as she straightened a cushion on the chair. "All right," she said softly, "then sit with me." She sat down across from him, her fingers folded together on her lap. In the dim light of the lamp, his features looked sharper, older, but still held the boy she had raised. She remembered the nights when he was little, falling asleep on that very couch with his head in her lap after a long day. Those days had passed quickly, and now he was a man. Daniel took a deep breath. "Mom, there's something I've been meaning to say for a long time, and I didn't want anyone else around when I said it." Laura's heart pounded harder. She tried to prepare herself for what was coming, but she couldn't guess what it might be. Her mind flashed with worry. Had she failed him somehow? Was he holding on to something she didn't know? For years she had carried guilt from her divorce, always wondering if she had let him down, if he had missed out on something he deserved. She steadied her voice. "Go on, Daniel." His gaze didn't waver. "You've carried so much on your own since Dad left. I've seen it. Even when you tried to hide it, I noticed. You were hurting, but you kept moving forward for me. You gave me everything you could, even when you had nothing left for yourself." Laura's breath caught. She wasn't expecting this. Her eyes stung, but she tried to blink it away. Daniel, he held up a hand gently. Please, let me finish. Laura nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. I just need you to know. I saw it all. And I don't want you to think for a second that you weren't enough. Because you were. You've always been enough. More than enough. The words hung in the air, pressing into her heart like sunlight breaking through a storm. She had waited years for reassurance she thought she would never hear. For so long she had battled the fear that her love hadn't been enough, that she had failed him by not keeping the family together. But here he was, telling her the very opposite. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with meaning. For the first time in years, Laura felt something loosen inside her, as though the weight she had been carrying alone was finally being lifted. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that this moment, this quiet conversation after everyone else had left, was going to change her. She didn't know how, but she could feel it. And before she could speak, before she could even find the words, Daniel reached across the space between them and took her hand. Laura sat frozen, her hand in Daniel's. His touch was warm, steady, filled with something she couldn't quite put into words. For years, she had been the one holding him, guiding him, comforting him through scraped knees, broken friendships, and growing pains. Now the roles felt reversed. He was the one reaching for her, giving her strength in a moment she didn't even realize she needed. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had always been quick to speak, quick to reassure, quick to smile, even when her heart was breaking. But tonight, she was silent. And in that silence, Daniel continued, his voice low but unshakable. I've been carrying this for a long time. I kept waiting for the right moment, but it never came. Tonight, when everyone left, I realized I couldn't hold it in anymore. I don't want you to keep thinking you've been alone all these years. You weren't. I was there, even when I didn't know how to help. And now I'm not a kid anymore. I can finally tell you what I should have said a long time ago. Laura's heart squeezed. She studied his face, the determined eyes, the tight jaw, the way he was choosing each word with care. He wasn't saying these things out of pity. He was saying them because they mattered, because they were truth. She swallowed hard. Daniel, you don't know how much this means to me. But he shook his head gently. I think I do. You've been so strong, Mom. Too strong, maybe? You gave everything to me and never asked for anything in return. And I see now how heavy that must have been. Laura's eyes brimmed with tears. She had worked 2 jobs after the divorce. She had skipped meals so he could eat, turned down new clothes for herself so he could have what he needed. She had smiled in front of him even when she cried alone at night. She never thought he noticed. But he had. Daniel leaned back slightly, but his gaze didn't leave hers. I stayed behind tonight because I couldn't let another day pass without telling you. You're the reason I became who I am. You're the reason I know what strength looks like. You've been my example all these years. Laura covered her mouth with her free hand, trying to steady her breathing. No one had spoken to her like this in years. Everyone praised her cooking, her kindness, her ability to hold the family together, but no one saw the invisible battles she fought when the house was quiet. No one but her son. She whispered, almost to herself, I thought I failed you. Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. Failed me? Mom, you saved me. You taught me that even when life falls apart, we can still stand. You showed me what love looks like, not perfect, not easy, but real. That's not failure. That's everything. The words pierced her like sunlight breaking through clouds. She shook her head, overwhelmed, her voice trembling. I've been waiting years to hear that. You don't know how often I wondered if you resented me, if you missed out on the life you should have had. Daniel's eyes softened. Maybe it wasn't the life I expected, but it was real. It was ours, and I wouldn't trade it. Not for anything. Laura leaned back against the couch, letting his words sink in. The room felt different now, lighter, though the same lamp glowed in the corner and the same plates waited in the kitchen sink. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, filled with understanding. She thought about how many times she had wanted to open up to him over the years, to confess how hard it had been, to share her fears. But she had always held back, thinking it wasn't his burden to carry. Now, hearing his words, she realized he had carried his own version of it all along. She looked at him, her voice quiet but sure. "Daniel, I'm proud of you. Not just for your job or the man you've become, but for this, for sitting here, for telling me what I didn't even know I needed to hear. You've given me something tonight that I'll never forget." For a moment, neither spoke. The lamp flickered slightly. A car passed outside, and the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the space between them. Then Daniel let out a breath and smiled softly. "Good, because I meant every word." Laura studied his face again, realizing something else. He wasn't just her son anymore. He was a man standing in front of her with his own strength, his own voice. And in that realization, she felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride for who he had become. Sadness for how quickly the years had passed. She whispered, "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. But tonight, you've given me hope. I thought I'd lost." Daniel leaned forward again. "Then let's start there. With hope." The simplicity of his words struck her deeply. For so long, she had been moving forward out of habit, out of duty. Tonight, she felt something shift inside her. Not just relief, not just gratitude, something stronger. A chance to begin again. Her eyes lingered on his, searching, as if trying to memorize this moment. And then she asked, barely above a whisper, "Why tonight? Why now?" Daniel hesitated, his eyes flickering down for the first time. "Because I've seen how tired you've been, Mom. You keep giving, but you don't let anyone give back to you. I realized if I kept waiting, if I stayed silent, I might lose the chance to tell you. And I couldn't let that happen." Laura's heart swelled with emotion she could hardly contain. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to hold him all at once. Instead, she simply nodded. Because she couldn't trust her voice not to break. The clock ticked again, louder this time, as though marking the moment. The weight of the past seemed to lift, leaving only the fragile, precious present between them. And then, with a voice steadier than she felt, Laura said, "You didn't just change my night, Daniel. You changed my life." Laura lay awake long after Daniel went to bed. The house was quiet, but her heart was restless, racing with everything he had said. His words replayed over and over in her mind like echoes that refused to fade. "You didn't fail me. You saved me. I wouldn't trade it for anything." She had waited years to hear those words. And now that she finally had it, felt like the ground beneath her had shifted. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts traveling back in time. She remembered the nights when Daniel was only 10, and she would come home late after a double shift, exhausted and aching. He would already be asleep, curled up on the couch, waiting for her. She would cover him with a blanket, kiss his forehead, and whisper, "I'm here, sweetheart." Those were the moments she thought he'd never remember, the ones she believed disappeared into childhood. But now she realized he had carried them with him all along. The next morning, the air in the kitchen felt different. Daniel was already up, making coffee, moving around like he belonged, not just as her son, but as a man taking responsibility. He glanced at her as she walked in, his voice casual but his eyes watchful. "Did you sleep?" Laura smiled faintly. "Not much. But it wasn't a bad kind of sleeplessness. Just a lot to think about." Daniel nodded knowingly. He didn't push, didn't demand answers. That quiet respect made her chest tighten. She realized how much he had grown, not just older, but wiser. Gentler. They sat at the table with steaming mugs between them, the silence comfortable this time. Laura studied him again. "You've changed, Daniel. When did that happen?" He chuckled softly. "Probably while you weren't looking. Or maybe because you were—" That answer caught her off guard. For years, she thought she was raising him alone, holding the world together with her bare hands. Now she saw that he had been watching her all along. Learning not from what she told him, but from how she lived, Laura reached across the table and touched his hand. "I need to tell you something, too. I thought I was protecting you by hiding how hard things were. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have let you see more of me, my struggles, my fears. Maybe then you wouldn't have carried the silence by yourself. Daniel's expression softened. You did what you thought was best. And honestly, I think it worked. You gave me strength even when you thought you were hiding your weakness. That's the kind of lesson that sticks. Her throat tightened. She had spent so many years doubting herself, questioning every choice, wondering if she had done enough. Hearing him say this felt like a balm on an old wound. The day passed in a blur of simple moments: cleaning up after breakfast, running errands, laughing at little things. But underneath it all, Laura felt something stirring. She couldn't explain it, only that the closeness between them had shifted. It wasn't just mother and son anymore. It was two people who had walked through fire together and finally spoken the truth about it. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel joined her on the porch. The sky was painted in streaks of gold and violet, the kind of sunset that made the world feel both fragile and eternal. They sat side by side, the silence stretching comfortably until Daniel finally spoke. "You know what I realized last night?" he asked. Laura turned to him. "What's that?" "That we've both been waiting. Me, waiting for the right time to tell you how much you mean to me. And you, waiting to hear it. But time doesn't wait for us. We have to take it when it's here." His words struck her deeply. She thought of the years lost to silence, the unspoken feelings that weighed between them. And she knew he was right. They couldn't afford to keep waiting. Laura took a breath. "Then let me say what I should have said long ago. You gave my life meaning, Daniel. When everything else fell apart, you were my reason to keep going. I may have raised you, but in many ways, you saved me too." Daniel's eyes glistened in the fading light. For a long moment, neither spoke. The truth hung between them, raw and unguarded. Then Daniel whispered, "I don't ever want you to doubt that again." The wind carried the scent of the garden, the soft rustle of leaves filling the silence. Laura felt her heart ache with a mixture of gratitude and longing for the years gone by. For the nights she had spent alone. For the love that had always been there but never spoken aloud. When she finally looked at him, her voice broke. "You didn't just give me words last night, Daniel. You gave me back myself." He reached for her hand again, holding it firmly, grounding her. "Then promise me something, Mom. Promise me you'll stop carrying everything alone. Let me be here for you. Not as a child needing care, but as someone who loves you enough to stand beside you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She nodded. "I promise." The moment felt sacred, as if the years of silence had been lifted away, leaving only the bond between them stronger, deeper. Unshakable. As the last streaks of light disappeared, Daniel turned to her again. "There's more I want to say, but I think I should wait. You've had a lot to take in already." Laura's heart skipped. His tone was gentle, but there was something in his words, something unfinished, waiting. She felt a flutter of nervousness and curiosity. What more could he have to tell her? She met his gaze, searching, and whispered, "Then don't wait too long. I'm ready now." Daniel held her eyes for a moment, then smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Soon, I promise." And with that, he squeezed her hand again, leaving her with both comfort and a new ache of anticipation, of wondering what doors had just been opened and what truths still waited in the quiet, inside the house. The clock ticked steadily, marking the passing of time. But for Laura, time felt different now. Not like something slipping away, but like something finally beginning. The night after their talk on the porch, Laura lay awake again. But unlike the restless nights of the past, this one felt different. It wasn't regret that kept her up, but anticipation. Daniel had left her with a promise, his voice echoing, "There's more I want to say soon." Those words stirred something inside her, a mix of hope and nervousness. She watched the clock move slowly into the early hours, thinking about what more could mean. Was it about his future? A decision he had made? Or something deeper, something he hadn't dared to share until now? She couldn't be sure, but she knew her heart was ready to hear it. The next morning, Daniel was already busy fixing things around the house. Laura noticed how naturally he moved, tightening a loose cabinet handle, checking the old leaky faucet, picking up groceries without her asking. It wasn't just the chores themselves. It was the way he did them, steady and sure. As though he was quietly stepping into a role she hadn't realized he was ready for. At lunch, he caught her watching him. "What is it?" he asked, smiling gently. Laura shook her head, but her voice was soft. "You remind me so much of your father when we first met. Only steadier, kinder, stronger." Daniel's smile faded slightly, his gaze lowering to the table. "That's part of what I wanted to talk about." "Dad leaving it broke something, didn't it?" Laura froze. She hadn't expected him to go there, not so directly. For years she had tiptoed around the subject, never wanting to open the wound. Now here it was, laid bare by her own son. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "It broke me. I tried not to let you see it, but it did." Daniel lifted his eyes, and she saw a determination in them that startled her. "That's why I stayed close. That's why I've been trying to be more than just your son. I didn't want you to feel abandoned again. Not by anyone. Especially not me." Her chest tightened. His words carried a weight she hadn't been ready to face. Yet they also carried a tenderness that reached straight to her heart. She whispered, "Daniel," but her voice caught. He leaned forward, his tone softer now. "Mom, I know I can't take Dad's place. And I'm not trying to. But what I can do is give you the kind of support he didn't. The kind you deserve. You've carried everything for so long. You don't have to anymore. Not while I'm here." For a long moment, Laura couldn't speak. She had expected him to reveal plans about school, work, or moving away. She had not expected this raw confession. This vow spoken not as a boy but as a man. Tears burned her eyes as she reached across the table and took his hand. "You've already given me more than I ever dreamed. You grew up in ways I couldn't even see. And now you're here telling me I don't have to be alone anymore. Do you know how much that means to me?" Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. "Then let me keep proving it. Let me be by your side, not just as your son, but as someone who sees you. All of you, the strong parts and the broken parts. You don't have to hide anymore." Laura's tears slipped freely now. For years she had carried her struggles in silence, believing that strength meant never showing weakness. Now in this moment she realized the greatest strength she had was in allowing someone else to stand beside her. The room felt heavy with emotion, but not in a painful way. It was the heaviness of truth finally spoken. Laura exhaled slowly and whispered, "You've already changed my life, Daniel. I thought I'd spend the rest of it waiting for something to heal me. But you've shown me the healing was here all along in you." Daniel's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "Then promise me you'll let yourself live again. Laugh, hope, dream. Promise me you won't just survive anymore." "I promise," Laura said, her voice trembling but firm. The afternoon faded into evening, and with it came a quiet peace. They cooked dinner together, sharing stories and laughter that felt lighter than anything in years. The house didn't feel heavy anymore, felt alive. Later, as the stars appeared, Daniel joined her again on the porch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of grass and night blooms. He looked up at the sky and then back at her. "You know," he said softly, "I used to be afraid of telling you these things. Afraid you'd think I was just a kid trying to be something I wasn't. But I'm not afraid anymore. I know who I am. And I know what you mean to me." Laura's heart swelled with pride and something deeper, something unnamed. She reached over and rested her hand on his arm. "You've grown into a man I admire, Daniel. And nothing makes me prouder than knowing you're my son." Silence settled between them, warm and full, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. For the first time in years, Laura felt whole, not because life was perfect, but because she wasn't carrying it alone. As the night deepened, Daniel turned to her once more. "I said I had more to tell you. I do. But maybe the words don't matter as much as the promise. I'm here, always. That's all you really need to know." Laura nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "And that's all I've ever needed." They sat together, mother and son, but also two souls who had weathered storms and found their way to each other again. And in that quiet night, Laura realized her life had shifted forever, not because of grand gestures or impossible miracles, but because her son had given her the one thing she thought she had lost, a reason to hope. For the first time in decades, she leaned back, breathed deeply, and let herself believe in tomorrow.